Welcome back to the 4th episode of Wolfgang Game Day. The concept: find the best college football matchups of the year, travel to those college towns for the weekend, and bring you guys along to experience what it's like to get invited to frat houses, underground poker games, parties, and more. So far, we've been to Oklahoma, Oregon, Tennessee, but this episode comes from College Station at Texas A&M for the matchup against LSU. After last weekend in Tennessee, Snarp and I decided to run it back for the 3rd time in a row, so I pick him up at the airport in Dallas, and we head south to College Station.
Well, anyways, chat, we are leaving Dallas. We're going to Texas A&M, and we'll see you guys when we get there, or we'll see you guys when we pick up the camera next.
One of my good friends, Gage, a senior at A&M, owns a room called Jokers in Aggieland, so that's obviously our first stop. You guys might remember some of the crazy action from this room in previous videos. The game is a 5-10, and I'm in for $1,000 to start. The action starts off tonight with King-Queen offsuit from the cutoff. There's an open to 40, and a good friend, Gio, on my right puts in the call. I decide to call as well here. I also could be mixing in some 3-bets. If you 3-bet here, you probably want to go around $150, but my call from the cutoff brings in Sean in the big blind. He's going to be the main villain in this hand, and just like that, we are off to a flop 4 ways, and it gives me top pair on a King 10-7 2-diamond board. Sean checks from the blinds, the original Razor checks, and Gio on my right checks. Now we have an interesting situation. Who's more likely to have the nuts on this board? That would be pocket kings. I think that would be the original Razor. Pocket 10s and 7s could be shared equally by everyone. There are some diamond draws out there. It's important to note I have the queen of diamonds. So although I have top pair, I could find myself in a gross situation if I bet here and it goes raise call or raise jam. So instead of that, I look to see a clean turn card and proceed from there. Additionally, by checking behind here, we could allow players to stab out on the turn, and then we can pick off some bluffs. So when I check behind, we see what seems to be a brick on the turn. It comes the 3 of spades. Sean in the big blind leads out now for $75, and the action folds around to me. I could just call, or I could re-raise targeting queen jack, diamond draws, maybe a worse king, and try to get money in now. So I decide to raise it up to $250, and Sean looks over at me with those glasses.
Can you see through those things, or? I raised.
He ends up shoving all in for $850, and after checking my cards and realizing I can't fold, I decide to put in the call, and we are off to a run out. 1 card to come in a nearly $1,900 pot. When the cards hit their backs, we see we are up Schitt's Creek without a paddle. Sean had pocket 3s. The check back on the flop was an absolute disaster. I said a brick on the turn. It was absolutely not a brick. Sean has crabs, and not in the bad way. He has a set here, and river's a boat when it comes to 10 of spades. It's a match to stack game, and I decide to buy in for $5,000 now. This next hand starts off with a $10 limp from under the gun. A player across the table also limps, and I make it Cinco de Mayo, baby. It's a fiesta. $55 to go with pocket jacks. Cooper on my left puts in the call, which brings in the under the gun limper and the player across the table. And the flop comes gin for us: ace, king, jack. Bang, we flop bottom set. I decide to play it tricky here, out of position against 3 opponents, and start with a check. Cooper takes the bait and fires out for $50, and the action's back over to me. If we go for a raise, I like a sizing between 200 and 300, or we could just call, which is what I decide to do, continue the trap, and let Cooper bet a hand like ace queen, ace 10, king queen, something like that. The turn now comes the king of diamonds, giving me a boat. I decide to continue the story and check it over to Cooper. Unfortunately though, he decides to check behind. The river card comes an inconsequential 7 of diamonds. Now it's time to get some value versus his 1 pair type of hands. So I lead out for $300. Hopefully he has a king and he thinks he can go for a raise, which looks like exactly what's about to happen. He almost string bets with 1 hand, but then brings out another barrel of orange chips, I guess. $1,000 is the raise. What a dream spot for us. Does he have a better full house though? That is the question. Let's think about the table dynamics really quickly. This is a 5-10 game, which I'm definitely used to, but Cooper is a college kid here at A&M, and I don't really think he's playing 5-10 too often, so this is probably a pretty big game for him. Thus, when I bet out for nearly pot and he raises me to $1,000, he probably has a pretty strong hand. Either that or he's a complete psychopath, maniac, degenerate, but if I had to bet on something, it probably has a decent hand here. Hands we beat are like king, queen, king 10. We're obviously losing to other full houses like ace, king, king, jack, but when I have a full house, I'm gonna put in the call. He's gonna have to show me a better hand. hand. After a little bit of thought, I put in the call. I don't want to nit roll him, and he indeed turns over a hand that we do have beat. King 10 offsuit for 3 of a kind. Cooper, if you're watching this, probably just put in the call there instead of the raise. You're most likely only going to get called by better, but at the same time, this $2,300 pot is very well appreciated being pushed in my direction.
Thanks, Cooper. Here you go. Here's the bag. That's a $1,000 bag sticker right there.
When you're up on the session, it's always fun to do some flips, and here in Aggieland, they love to do flips to the tune of $2,000. We do a $2,000 flip with Tony. He had his horse being the blue hoodie kid, and I ended up having my buddy Gage in seat number 8. A massive sweat here for $2,000. We really need our buddy Gage to pull it out here. Let's see if the house has the edge. Absolutely not. Seat 7 has ace deuce offsuit and makes top pair on the flop. Gage has 7-6 offsuit, so ends up making bottom pair. Tries to hold on, but unfortunately cannot, which means we're losing $2,000 in that flip. Okay, back to poker. We have $5,600 in my stack. I'm in for $6,000 at this point, and I look down at pocket jacks. Brasher opens it up to $50 over a limp, and the action's on me. I decide to come in for a 3-bet here and go for a sizing of $225. Brasher puts in the call, and we are going off to a flop heads up, which comes 10-10-6 with 2 spades. Out of position against him, I decide to go for a $75 C-bet. He puts in the call, and the turn brings an overcard. It's the queen of clubs. I have 2 options here. I could either slow down and check, giving him credit for having a 10 or a queen. But I think that opens the door for Brasher putting us in a tough spot. If he bets turn and I call, he could just bomb the river, and I'm pretty capped when I check the turn. So instead, I decide to bet out here into the $615 pot to the tune of $250. Brasher folds, we win. That's a desired outcome. If he calls on the turn, I'm probably gonna have to check river. He might be able to blow us off with a big bet, but unfortunately for him, he couldn't find a sticky call on the turn, and that means we are winning hand number 3 of this session. All right, our stack is up to $5,800. I look down at 10-6 of hearts, and I find myself in the $80 straddle. Hector raises it up to $225, and when it folds back around to me in the $80 straddle, I decide to put in the call for not much more. Off to a flop we go, which comes 9-6-3 rainbow, and I start with a check. He goes for a down bet here of $120, and when I make second pair, there's nothing for me to do other than call. I get a little bit sticky here, and the turn gives me 2 pair on the 3 of hearts. I check it over to Hector once again. Will he check behind? Will he continue to fire? And he decides to check behind, giving me a full house on the river. Bang, it comes a 6 of spades. I could lead out here for like $500, trying to target a pair of 7s, 8s, maybe an ace king, ace queen type of hand that just doesn't believe me, or I could check it over to Hector and go for a check raise. I think he's going to check behind with all of his ace and king highs. He might try to turn a hand like queen jack, queen 10 into a bluff here on the river and get me to fold a king high type of hand. And I think all of his overpairs are also going to bet on this river, so I like checking over to him and going for a check shove. But unfortunately, when I check it over to him, he checks behind with one of those hands, ace 9 of spades for 2 pair. He turns it over pretty confidently, but no bueno, Hector. I'm taking down this pot with 10-6 of hearts out of the $80 straddle. Call me a straddle specialist. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us into the last hand here at Jokers of Aggieland. And how else would we want to do it with a 20, 40, 80, 160 straddle for my buddy Gage? I mean, he is the house after all. I look down at pocket ochos here, which is definitely good enough for a raise. I make it $350 to go. That's going to clear out a bunch of the straddlers, but when it goes back around to Gage, he has $160 invested. I open it up and I'm his friend, so he's going to jam it all in, give me some action here, $810. It's like around 4 or 5 big blinds for him. It seems like a pretty no-brainer shove. Of course, when it comes back to me, I got to put in the call here with the ochos. We're going to run this board out 2 times, so hopefully we do not chop it. We would love to scoop our buddy Gage and finally book a win here at Jokers. I turn over my cards and Gage shows us the 10 of hearts, but keeps his other card face down, so kind of a little sweat here. We're off to a run out. We don't know exactly what we have to fade, but he says we have the first board when it runs out 7-9 jack 4 queen. For the second board, he finally shows us the other card. It's the 4 of clubs, so sure enough, we did take down the first board. The second board comes ace jack 9. A 3 of hearts on the turn means he only has an out to a 10, but it doesn't come. It's the queen of clubs. We're taking down a nice $2,000 pot to end the session here at Jokers of Aggieland. After racking up our chips and cashing out here at Jokers, we make moves over to Good Bull, and things get out of hand pretty quickly. Snarp introduces me to the guys who started Fetty, a new group rideshare app. They bought a table here at Good Bull, which means unlimited bottles, and I took full advantage. Saturday rolls around, which means college football and tailgating. Papa Joe's a local legend here with a ranch, and he pitches me a sick idea for a future video at his ranch.
It'll be the dumbest thing online ever. So it'll be the biggest hog, the biggest fish in the poker tournament together, all at Dos Rios at my ranch. We will have to do 100%.
After leaving the tailgates, we run into the village troll Snarp, who's doing his best to instigate the Aggie fans for his weekly video.
You would fuck a tiger.
We then head inside the stadium where Gage got us some of the best seats in the house, courtesy of the long snapper on the team, Jacob Graham. A&M ends up winning 38-23 in what is now referred to as the Marcel Reed game. He ends up rushing for 3 second-half touchdowns, which means yes, we're on the field for the 3rd straight week. This game wasn't an all-out field rush, but I hopped the wall and quickly blended in, getting some cool footage along with it. After beating the 8th best team in the country, the bars are on everyone's mind, but before we can get over to Good Bull to celebrate, Snarp gets into a situation at Northgate.
Come on, how many? How many, motherfucker? How many what?
Hey, didn't bro hit me in the face and I get arrested? Like, that's crazy.
Sunday means another poker game. I've been messaging with Carson and we link up with him and his friends for a 25-cent, 50-cent game. I'm in for $100. In the first hand, we look down at ace jack of spades from the big blind. There's a few limps over to Jeremy, who decides to punish the limpers to the tune of $2.50. I decided to put in the call, and that's going to pick up another customer. We're off to a flop, which comes pretty unfair. 10-5-3 all spades. Bang, we flop the nut flush. When Jeremy checks, I fire out for $1.50 and he decides to put in the call. The turn comes another spade, so I'm not really sure if that helps me or hurts me. If he has the king or queen of spades in his hand, we might be able to get a little bit more action. But I decided to check back on the turn, letting him bet out on the river, which he doesn't do on the 9 of hearts. $11 in the middle. I gotta go for a bet here. I go half pot, $5.50. It's a small Cinco de Mayo bet here. Will that get a call from Jeremy? Absolutely not. I turn over the jack of spades and then flip over the ace of spades, letting them know that even though I'm playing a pretty small game here, I'm still going to try and take their money.
I was gonna say, it's because I didn't Cinco de Mayo, that's right.
All right, in this next hand, the $1 straddle is out there. Everyone hold on to your seats. We're playing a massive hand. I decided to raise it up to $3 and Jackson 3-bets it to $11. The action folds back around to me and I decide to put in the call with 10-9 of spades. And I check it over to him on a pretty good board for his range, ace king deuce with 2 clubs. Surprisingly, he checks behind, which brings in the 10 of clubs on the turn. Now with some showdown value, I don't think I need to turn my hand into a bluff. I check it over to Jackson once again, who surprisingly checks behind for a second time. That brings in the 5 of clubs on the river. I think Jackson is more likely to have the high clubs in his hand, but there's $24 in the middle to fight for, which means if I see weakness on the flop and turn, I'm gonna fire out here for $11 and try to bully the pot away from Jackson. Some funny table talk here develops and he's thinking about it for a while, covers his face.
You had like ace queen? No way. Top set, no club.
And ultimately decides to put in the call. When I show just a pair of 10s, he turns over top set. Jackson, how are you not betting that flop or turn, buddy? That is a premium hand. But it looks like you got the maximum versus this fish over here in seat number 8.
This guy hates money.
All right, 2 more hands to go. I have $65 in my stack, so I'm stuck $35 in this session. I look down at the ladies, and usually when you see some ladies, they're probably going to lose you some more money, but I raise it up to $2 and we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 callers, so 7 ways to a flop here. Do the players who folded their cards want their cards back? Well, they're gonna find out on an ace 10 4 board, and I start with a check. Having pocket queens, there's always a king or an ace on the flop, and that's no different here. The action checks through. When the turn comes a 5, I decide to check call a bet from Nick. The river comes a brick, and we're gonna beat queen 10 offsuit when the action goes check. Nice little $26 pot being shipped over my way. All right, $75 in our stack. Let's see if we can get even on the session. I look down at ace 10 offsuit from the button. I open it up to $3 and we get a few colors. Off to a flop we go, multi-wave, which comes 10-9-3 rainbow. When the action checks to me, I bet out for $3.50 and 2 players put in the call. Off to the turn we go 3 ways, which comes another 10, the 10 of spades. Now we definitely have a lock on this hand. When I bet out for a small Cinco de Mayo here, Carson is the only customer to put in the call, bringing in the 4 of diamonds on the river. Carson checks the river over to me, and I decide to now go for a larger Cinco de Mayo, but I do it for $55.50. That's a first here on the vlog.
Cinco de Mayo, 55.50.
It's such a strong play that Carson has to fold his cards, which means we're taking down a $92 pot to end the session. With that last hand wrapped up, Snarp and I hit the road back over to Dallas. It was awesome playing in that Neil P game. All the guys there were super fun to play with, and hopefully I showed them some tips and tricks that can make them a winning player in bigger games in the future. But now it's time to tally up the 2 games and see how we did. I ended up making $614 playing poker at Jokers in Aggieland, but sadly we lost a $2,000 flip, so really I lost $1,386. I ended up getting out for $93 in the Neil P game courtesy of Carson, which means a $7 loss, bringing my grand total to a $1,393 donation to the Texas A&M campus. It's time now to rate my trip here to Aggieland. I give the College Station area a 5 out of 10. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere and there's not too much to do, but the experience and atmosphere though gets a 9 out of 10. From the football to the bars to the whole vibe of the college town, it's really hard to beat. The poker gets a 9 out of 10. Having a true card room in a college town is goated. Shout out to Gage. And I get a ton of DMs from home games as well, making this a great place for a true DGen to enroll. If you like this video, there's 2 other Wolfgang Game Day college videos on your screen right now. Click one of those to keep watching. Hit the like and subscribe button to follow along on the journey. Next week is Penn State, a massive game, a really fun video. Hit that subscribe button to make sure you guys watch that video in a few days from now. Good luck on the felt, you guys, and as always, I'll catch you in the next video. Peace!